We are recording.
This is Marn Frank. I am the Atlas Star and Literacy Coordinator. This is my 13th year in that position. Time flies. I hope you're having a good conference so far. I've attended 2 sessions on using volunteers in classrooms, distance learning, and it's just reaffirmed the creativity that I see or hear about across the state in this very difficult time. I am the primary presenter during the next 60 minutes, but I'm grateful and delighted to have 3 panelists who will be helping me out. They will be sharing their experiences, monitoring the chat, and also answering questions as they arise as we go along. So, Krista, would you turn on your camera and introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Krista Coronado, and I work in Minneapolis adult education as a STAR coordinator and a coordinator for student support for students with disabilities. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Terrisa?
Hi, I'm Terrisa. I'm joining you from Buffalo, beautiful Buffalo, Minnesota. And I teach STAR and family learning, a group of moms, and a couple other reading classes and GED open labs. Nice to be here with Marn and the other ladies too.
And Christine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Kelly. I have been teaching STAR for a long time and am fortunate enough to work right down the hall from Marn as the other literacy coordinator when we are in person. And I also teach STAR GED prep diploma for Robbinsdale Adult Basic Ed.
I'm going to turn my camera off also, so that we can focus on the slides. So over the next 60 minutes, I have 6 objectives. The first is to explain the intended purpose of each tool so that you understand why they might be useful in your classroom, to share slide set contents and samples. And it's very possible I have too many samples. So as time travels on, we'll make those decisions on the road as to how many I can show. We will also offer recommendations for starting, using, and scoring of the tools. If that isn't enough information, Christine is going to put a PDF in the chat box that's called E-DRA Processes and Scoring Guidelines. This is a companion document specifically for E-DRA that gives you step-by-step directions for how to conduct the tests. As I mentioned, we'll also hear from the panelists about their experiences. We'll try to address questions along the way, and we'll even stick around after if there are certain questions that don't get answered. The conclusion will be a short poll asking for your likes about the eTool features so that I have your important feedback for moving forward. Before I forget, both of the tools are easy to find. You start at the Atlas website, and then the host muted me, sorry about that. You click on resources. There are multiple places again to find the link for resources. You're looking for the Reading Resource Library, which has a gold color theme. Off to the right, once you enter the Reading Resource Library, there's a drop-down box, and under Diagnostic Assessment, you'll find the E-DRA tools. Further down, I think in alphabetical order, you'll look for Reading Components, and you'll click on Alphabetics, and that's where you'll find the E-Alphabetics slide sets. I want to make clear that E-DRA is not required or mandated by the Department of Education. Unlike CASAS or TABE, these are additional tests. They're quite informal and can be conducted quickly and of great value. So if you can conduct a few more tests, you will acquire additional information about your reader's phonics, alphabetics, fluency, and comprehension skills. For example, if you conduct the phonics test, you'll have a record of what letter sound patterns your students know and don't know. And then you would address those unknown letter sound patterns to build their word reading, both in isolation and context. By conducting the other tests for oral word reading, oral text reading, and silent text reading, you'll acquire instructional levels that are useful for planning and delivering. The instructional levels are those levels often within a range that are not too hard and not too difficult. They should be slightly challenging because that will produce progress. Again, these results are useful for lesson planning, selecting materials, and if you can do this within your distance or hybrid classroom, they can also help you group students by similar levels, not necessarily by same levels, but by similar levels. We'll start with the phonics test. The official name is Sylvia Green's Informal Word Analysis Inventory. It was created by adult literacy experts and made public domain quickly. This means it can be shared freely and can be posted on our Atlas website. The original version of the Sylvia Green had 2 levels of about 30-40 words each. Level 1 introduced short vowels and single digraph blend consonants, so very, very basic words. Level 2 progressed into the long and the glotted vowels, the silent letters, the irregular spellings, and stepped into 2-syllable words with ED. A couple of years ago, because that was too many words per level and it was hard for teachers to figure out stopping points, I subdivided those levels into 3 lists each. And so that's much more helpful in terms of knowing when to stop. So you have 6 lists now under the Sylvia Green, and you want to start with an easier word list to build test comfort. Also to build test understanding, because many students have not been involved in a one-to-one test like this. So again, start easier, and I think the results will be more valid. You have 2 choices for the slide sets. There's one set that presents 2 to 6 words at a time, or 1 word at a time. 2 to 6 is less than 30 or 40, but it can be too much for some students. So whatever works best. There's also a teacher copy that you would have beside you for scoring and tracking those unknown patterns. Not all of the words or lists need to be presented. So again, there's 2 levels, 6 lists, 70, 80 words, but you don't have to present them all. You stop when you see that pattern of error, when things are getting too hard. And again, that tells you where to start instruction. This is an example of the level 1 list 1. And you'll see that these are all short A words, 3 letters. There's one name. So all of the words on the Sylvia Green are either real words or common names. This is list 2, where we step out of short A and move into short U, short O, and short E. Mod is a real word. It comes up in Merriam-Webster as being an informal version of modern. And fen is a wet, marshy place. List 3 moves into 4 and 5 letter words with blends. The S blends and then the ending blend of NT. If you prefer the one word at a time, this is an example of what the first 3 words of level 1, list 1 would look like. For word recognition testing, another public domain test, we have the word reading test. And this was also developed by adult literacy experts. This has 4 lists, lists A, B, C, and D. Each list will help you identify 2 grade levels. So 1 to 2 for A, 3 to 4 for B, 5 to 6 for C, and 7 to 8 for D. Start 1 to 2 levels below the Casas or TABE reading grade level. Again, on the easier side, to build that test familiarity and maybe even some confidence. The choices of the slide sets are 5 of 10 words or 1 word at a time. As students read the words, you are scoring them as a 1 or a 0. And they have between 3 to 5 seconds to say the word correctly. And if they self-correct, it's counted as correct. I recommend using 1 and 0 over check or minus or check and plus, because our brains are used to counting numbers. And what you do after they attempt the 10 words is you will count how many correct. There's also a teacher copy for scoring and determining the grade equivalent. If a student has 7 or 8 correct on a list, it's the lower grade equivalent. If they have 9 or 10 correct, it's the higher grade equivalent. That also tells you to move on because it's at least that higher grade equivalent. And once again, not all of the words or lists need to be presented. So here's list B. So we are moving ahead from 1-syllable words into 2-syllable words. Here's list C, where we take even a bigger step into 3- and 4-syllable words. And these words have prefixes and suffixes. So if a student in general scores between grade equivalent 1 to 3, that means they likely have phonics needs. If they score between 4 and 8, they're ready for advanced alphabetics or multi-syllable decoding. So this is where it starts. So if they can handle these words, they're ready, or they need more support as the words get even longer. Text fluency is not public domain. We use passages from the Bader Language and Reading Inventory, which is owned by Pearson Education. I'm sure you're familiar with Pearson Education. And they allowed us to share the passages, but only upon request. So I can't post them to the Atlas website, but if you email me them or email me, I can send you them. There are 2 slides per level, and the grade equivalent range is from 1 to 8. Each slide presents 1 to 3 paragraphs of the passage at a time. So if the student is significantly struggling with the first couple paragraphs, you can stop. You don't have to drag them through the entire passage. And again, the recommendation for starting is 1 to 2 levels below the CASAS or TABE. The scoring is a little tricky. You're scoring holistically. So if an oral reading is poor, you score it as 1. If it's fair, it's a 2. If it's good enough, it's a 3. A poor means there are many word errors, and that interferes with the fluency to the point where it's slow and choppy. If it's a 2, there are only some word errors, but the text reading is uneven. Their phrasing is not consistent. A 3 means there are few, if any, word errors, and the text reading is smooth. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. What you come up with then is an instructional range of 1s and 2s. So whatever levels were scored as 1 and 2 tells you where the students need support. The 3 is more the independent level. The 1 to 2 are the levels of struggle. There's also a teacher fluency page that reminds you of the scoring scale and gives you a place to record those scores and then figure out what that means for slightly challenging text. And obviously, you don't have to do all paragraphs or passages. This is a sample of Google It, which is level 4. It's a conversation, so it's fiction. However, most of the passages are nonfiction. So if your student is struggling with those first 2 paragraphs, you could stop. And these are the last 2 paragraphs. I chose a very plain font and tried to make the size as big as I could to keep the passages on 2 slides. The text comprehension testing is also protected because we're using different passages from the Bader. So we're not using the same passages for fluency and comprehension, but different. There's one PDF for all the passages because I was told by a pilot teacher that students really need to see the entire passage on the screen in order to answer the questions. So the one PDF has all of the 8 passages together. Again, start 1 to 2 levels below. Allow 1 silent reading before asking text-dependent questions. And those questions are available in that PDF. So you'll have to maybe watch the student as they read and stop them from doing a second read because the test protocol is that they are asked questions based on 1 read. Again, use 1 or 0 to mark their answers. If they have 75% or more correct, that's considered mastery. So you would add 1 to that for instructional, and that tells you where they need support with comprehension. There is an optional teacher comprehension interview that asks students about their reading skills. Some teachers in the past have used it to begin the diagnostic reading. Some students use it to complete, but it's totally optional. It does give you other valuable information about how they perceive their reading skills. This is an example of the level 5 story, A Famous Automobile. This is nonfiction. You can see with a browse that there are place names, people names, dates. It's got a lot of detail. So this is why the student needs to be able to see the passage after reading it when you're asking the questions. You don't want them to necessarily reread, but they should be able to scan. Here's an example of the questions that you're asking about a famous automobile. So you can see there's who, why, and what questions. And I revised them so they are text dependent. What's in parentheses is the idea or concept that you're looking for, but the student does not have to give you the word for word answer. So if it's close enough, you count it correct. For example, if they answered who built the first automobile with nobody knows, that would be correct. It's not word by word, but it's close enough. Okay, Krista, do you want to share your experiences with DRA?
Sure. Right. Well, as you guys can see on your screen, I started testing students mid-September, and for 2 different classes, program-wide for us, both in the evening and the day. And I'm using the current platform that we're using for classes, which is Schoology. And so that was really important for our program to not try something else while we're doing an assessment. So we started there. I just wrote a couple of things that I have learned in this process, and I'm still learning as I do tests each week. To be prepared that everyone is on different devices and may have different needs. So for example, when Marn was just pointing out the comprehension PDFs versus the slides, if a student's on a phone, how that comes up on our online platform is really small. So learning what they can see, what they can't see, teaching them even how to make things bigger or smaller on their phones, if they're on an iPad versus a laptop, all those things. So generally the first question I ask students is if they can tell me what kind of device they're on. I've learned over and over again too to give way more time with each student than you think. I used to be able to do a lot of this assessing in around 20-25 minutes when we stopped doing the vocabulary piece. And I'm working with mostly upper level students, so I don't do Sylvia Green generally. And now I would say from students getting into my online program or platform, and then explaining things, sharing the screen, all those things, I would say it's about almost 40 minutes on a good day. Try to know your online platform fairly well before trying to assess students. I've had a huge learning curve just trying to learn Schoology conferencing. What does that look like? What do the students see? What do they not see? How can I make things viewable better so they can see it and be able to read fluently on the screen for me. If it is possible, ask students to turn on cameras. I don't have generally students that have enough bandwidth to do that, but I do ask that if they could just turn on their camera quick so I can see a little bit of their mouths reading, especially the fluency piece. And I try to turn on my camera to say hi so that we remember that we're humans and not just voices. It's been okay, but I can't always get a student to be able to have enough bandwidth to be able to have their camera on during the whole, especially the fluency part or the fluency assessment. And give yourself a lot of grace. I've muted students. I've turned off the conference when I didn't mean to. I've thought that I've shared the right screen and they can't see it. I mute myself and then ask them a question and then realize what I've done. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at in Minneapolis with E-DRA. I really appreciate all the things Marn has developed because that has helped us a ton to be able to do it with students.
Well, thank you for making use of them. It was a lot easier in person.
Yes.
To do these assessments. Time has always been a factor, and now it's complicated by technology. Yep. So, Christine, how about you? Did you want to add to this?
When I looked at Krista's slide yesterday, she pretty much said everything that I would have said. One thing that I would say is I've just done a couple of the tests, and it does take time. I actually spread it out over 3 meetings. Students can sign up for 15-minute slots, 15-minute or half an hour slots. So I would agree 40 minutes for the 3 for the alphabetics, the fluency, and the comprehension. But it just reminded me that it's not ideal to be doing this now, but this was an adult student who really was not confident and felt that her whole life she's not been able to read. And just her response, how excited she was when I was able to clearly tell her what her strengths were and identify things that she knew or that she knows are areas she needs to grow. She was just so happy with the results that when we can still do this kind of assessment, it's important that we do so, because that's such a missing piece right now, not being in the classroom.
And I think what's real for right now, if you're considering doing diagnostic reading assessment, is maybe 1 more test than passes or take. Not 3 like Krista and Christine were talking about, but maybe just 1. Okay, so are there questions that need to be answered yet in the chat box, or new questions?
Marn, we've only had a few, and I just typed in an answer to 1, so I think we're under control in there. You're very clear, so I think not many questions.
Okay. Well, I'll wait just a moment to see if any more arrive.
The only question that I see right now is about assuming vocabulary needs, and I just responded that yes, at intermediate levels for ABE students and for ESL students, we can pretty much assume vocabulary needs.
Yeah, and that came out of many observations of STAR classrooms where 80–90% of the students had needs identified by assessment and or were involved in vocabulary instruction. So it was a big time saver on our part to say, I think we're safe with this anecdotal data or qualitative data to say you can assume vocabulary needs. And yes, I have trained hundreds of volunteers in how to conduct these tests, because STAR teachers don't have the time they need. So in many, many programs, volunteers have stepped up to conduct the assessment. I'm not sure if online, but definitely they were in person.
Marn, I think that this is actually a good question because so many of the people here aren't doing STAR exactly, but this question, so you'd recommend one of the 3 assessments in addition to a CASAS. The importance of this kind of diagnostic assessment as opposed to simply, as opposed to only giving a CASAS or a TABE test.
Well, it depends on the level of the student. I think if you're talking about beginning level students, then conducting the phonics test or the word recognition test would give you important additional information. If you're talking about higher level students, then I would say the fluency and comprehension would be most appropriate. Or just fluency, because comprehension, we already have TABE and CASAS, but I know some programs find this different version of comprehension testing to be of value. Any other?
It looks like there's a question about the format to do the E-DRA. I would suggest whatever online platform you're using to meet with students for class time, use that, so it's not another thing they need to learn. In Minneapolis, we use Schoology conferencing to do those assessments. I just create a conference in each of those classes for the students to enter on their own.
Yeah, and I guess I'm hoping that the screen sharing works in multiple formats.
I've used it in Zoom. Well, not the testing slides, but the other slides. So
Okay.
I'm assuming they'll work about the same.
Well, and we're seeing them in Zoom right now. So yeah,
Right,
I guess I
right.
would assume that too.
Right. Martin, it's about 3:34 just for your pacing needs.
Okay. Well, let's try to find time at the end for these questions not answered, or if people want to stick around, we'll go back to them at 4 o'clock. All questions are important. E-Alphabetics has been developed or is under development for students at ABE levels 2 to 4, ESL 5, and advanced. So it's for adult readers who are still struggling, but beyond the phonics level. So it's for those students who are ready to build their multi-syllable word chunking, decoding, meaning making, and usage in text. Again, they're screen shareable. They cover common compounds, suffixes, and prefixes. And the slide sets should take multiple lessons. So it's not one set per lesson, but it could be over a week. It could even be over a month, depending on how often you meet. They offer a lot of selection. So they don't have to be done in any order. They don't all have to be done. And you don't have to teach every slide or word list. There's 3 concluding activities, and you can also choose from them. And I highly encourage you to add your own to the slide sets. I tried to make them follow the explicit instruction model. Right now, Compound words is done, and 6 of 8 suffix slide sets are done, and then prefixes, I'll start soon. So I begin with explaining what is a suffix or prefix, what does it mean, and what are the changes in spelling, usage, or pronunciation for that specific suffix. And then the next slide set scaffold from familiar or basic words to less familiar or academic. So if your students can only manage the more familiar words, just teach those. If you want to start with familiar as a warm-up and then move into academic, you can do that. I also scaffold with the chunking, the given chunking, the given meanings, the given examples or synonyms. So the first slides have a lot more information, and then the next slides step away from that so that you can engage students in applying what they know about the chunking and decoding. Like I said, there are 3 activities, 2 of 3 activities at the end for application, where they're taking their knowledge of the taught pattern and words and applying it to more meaning making or read to write activities. This is the introductory slide for compound words. And compound words is a really good place to start for multisyllable decoding because they are separate words. So to see the chunking within compound words is easy. This is a sample of a very familiar set of words where day is the common chunk added to time, light, dream, break, and care. So the plus sign indicates where the chunking should happen. And then because this is a beginning slide, I give the meaning. This slide is later on. I'm still giving the chunking, but not the meaning. So at this point, you would guide your students in chunking and reading the word, and then figuring out the meaning. And I also highly recommend that you give them opportunities to use the words in context, either with an example or a sentence. This is a set of technology compounds. No chunking, no meaning. But I thought it was important to include these kinds of words because we are surrounded by them. So you would guide them in seeing cell phone, smartphone, microphone, headphone, and then figure out, even though they're similar with the phone part, what the differences in meaning are. And I learned a lot about upload and download from this slide. This is an example of the matching activity. So if matching is one of those concluding activities, there are 4 slides, 20 words. So along the left-hand column are the taught words, and then the meanings are what they are matching to the word. Another slide set is called timely words, and it focuses on the suffix ly. And this is an example of the slide that all of the sets have that explains what are suffixes. So I'm telling what they are and why it's important to learn them. And this is important for buy-in because sometimes students are reluctant to participate in alphabetics or word study. They might see it as too babyish, but it's highly necessary for higher level reading to get the words correctly off the page, recognize them and their meaning, read text fluently, and understand what the author is trying to tell you. So it's really, really an important skill. In fact, there's a very high correlation between this type of morphology study and comprehension. This is an example of the slide that specifically talks about the suffix ly. So I identify it as a consonant suffix because it starts with a consonant. It sounds like ly, and it usually forms adverbs. And then I tell what it means. So mostly it means like or in that way and forms adverbs. Sometimes it means every and forms adjectives. And then I also explain any spelling changes that happen when adding that suffix. This is a sample of ly words, very familiar or basic. So I give the chunking, I give the meaning, and I give an example. Then I step away from the chunking and the meaning, and it becomes more of a discussion or application of seeing the ly and knowing that's the trunk, and then adding that to the base. This is what a right to read activity looks like. So I came up with topics that I thought were appropriate for adults. And then I created a word list with that same pattern. And so students can work with you, maybe take it to a breakout group and write a paragraph. This paragraph, of course, is written first and then read. And maybe even revised after they've read it. They do not have to use all of the words. It's a word bank. So the expectation is that they use as many as they can. And that really helps them to own those words in their own writing. Worker words focuses on the suffixes ER and OR. ER is used much more commonly than OR. OR is used with more academic words. So here's, in alphabetical order, a set of familiar words. And any asterisks indicate there's been a spelling change. I went back and forth between like not taking off the silent E, but the text was confusing to me. So this was my way of showing how it is spelled and chunked without the E, the original E. Here's another set. And then this is a sample of OR words. And what I chose to do with these, because they are academic, is to give the base word. And then the arrow indicates the change with OR. So in a lesson, if you were using this slide, you might only get through half of the words because it will take time to chunk, make meaning, and come up with context. Flashy words is the suffix y. So this is an easier suffix to teach, like ER and ly. So there's a sample of familiar Y words in alphabetical order. Here's a transition between familiar to less familiar, and also no chunking or meaning. So this could be one lesson. Alphabetics is generally recommended to be maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes at a time. And so this could perhaps fill that short time. This is an example of the sentence combining. So I found a text on freereading.net, And I modified it a bit to be more appropriate for adults. They're a great source of stories, but they are written for children. And so the first thing you would do is read the entire passage aloud. And then you would walk through how you could combine sentences. Not all of the sentences need to be combined. So for example, you would read, rainbows are mighty bands or arcs of color across the sky. They are also lengthy. You could say, I could combine mighty with lengthy for a longer, more complicated or academic sentence. For sure, you would combine, it can't be dreary, it can't be cloudy, it can't be foggy. That's very repetitive. So the sentences that you're combining either have words that could be combined or sentences that could be combined. The suffix ion was a real challenge because it has the one spelling ion, but when it's added to words that end with S or T, it becomes shun. And then you also have Asian. So this suffix took me a long time to wrap my head around, and I hope that the slides in sequence will make sense to you and your students. This is an example of how complicated it can get. So this is a later slide of academic words with ION that end in T, most of them. So to provide some extra support, in addition to the base and the word with the suffix, I also gave synonyms. And then here, I took away the synonyms for discussion. Portable words works with ABLE and IBLE, able being far more common than IBLE. So again, here's a slide about midway through the set where the chunking has disappeared, but the meaning is there. And the asterisks for any spelling changes. And then here's the base word and the academic word with IBLE. And there's no rule for choosing ABLE over IBLE, but the pattern is that you only find IBLE in academic words. Then we have AL and IAL, which are tricky because they have different pronunciations. So AL is ul. So for this slide, I give the meaning and an example and try to show them the relationship between the suffix word and the base. There's not always a relationship. And then this is IAL, which is pronounced EO, centennial, editorial, menial, millennial. Okay, Terrisa, do you want to share your experiences with using E-Alphabetics?
Sure. What you're seeing right now is a screenshot that I took during a class that meets via Zoom. It's a family literacy class, but they're all language learners, most at an advanced, some at an intermediate level. And in class, when we were able to meet in person last year, we had gone through compound words, and I just had dropped it. When we started meeting online in March, I just any kind of alphabetics with the group. But just recently, last month, I pulled up the slides for the E-Alphabetics, and we began with what are suffixes. So a little bit of overlap because we had covered suffixes when we met in person together. So I just chose a place that made sense to me to begin with those slides. You can see a couple of the students off to the right, and they're looking at the notes here. And I recommend highly just to stop and be quiet and give them time to write everything on the screen or underline what you want them to write in their notes and then give them time. In the past, I talk at the same time that they're writing, and that was hard for my high school students, and it's even harder for language learners. So I recommend quiet while they write. And then when they give me a sign, a thumbs up, or the icon down at the bottom, they can put a thumbs up when they're ready to move on. I've faced challenges with moving from one screen to another. And so I just give them recommendations, what's to do if teacher is struggling, just look over your notes, figure out what question you can ask or practice using something so they have a plan when I'm having technical issues. Next week, I plan to introduce using these slides. I have some in-person classes that I anticipate might have to go virtual. So I'm going to introduce it with my real foundational reading class that have some learning disabilities. So I'm going to pull the slides up on the whiteboard in our class so that the students can get familiar with that tool. I'm going to begin at a place that matches about where we're at in our Mega Words books. So that really works for me. There's a lot of overlap. And I just recommend giving yourself lots of time and don't cover much. I mean, it's really exhausting. So kind of I watch my students' faces. I can still see the crunchy eyebrows. So if they're getting tired, then that's enough. I would say in class, I can go 15 minutes with alphabetics, but when it's via Zoom, I would say 10 and 10 to 12, and then move on to something else. It's really hard to focus via Zoom. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think Terrisa reinforces that these are intended to be short lessons because they are very intense. And they actually are a combination of alphabetics and vocabulary. So don't plan to cover too much, but make it as regular as possible. One of the reasons I developed these slides is prior to the pandemic and the shift to distance learning, we had great resources for teaching alphabetics, but they were all in print form. So there was, and still is, a big gap in materials that can be screen shared without creating your own PowerPoints, which I know some STAR teachers are doing. They're taking the information from the print materials and putting them on PowerPoints. Well, my hope is that this will save you time. You've got something not done yet, but ready to go.
Marn, we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I'm going to go into the chats and see if there's any questions that need to be answered. Christine or Terrisa, do you note any?
I think a lot of them we were answering in the chat as we went.
Okay.
There was one about if we can't screen share with them during the assessments part, do you have any other ideas for accommodating that and still assessing their reading skills?
Well, you could send paper copies of the word reading tests and the Sylvia Green because they're public domain, but you could not send copies of the beta because of the copyright.
Thank you. So Elizabeth, don't listen to me, listen to Marn.
I mean, finagling this deal out of Pearson Education required numerous emails and wheeling and dealing, and we had to pay for this protected copyright. So I don't think they'll come after me, but I just get a little nervous about going beyond the permission they granted us.
I was just hesitant to send some in the mail because I have a hard enough time explaining how to shuffle the papers when I'm 6 feet from them. So to try to say, okay, take out this page right now.
Yeah.
I was trying to imagine how that might work without eyes.
Yeah. It's hard enough as it is to be tested. So yeah. Shuffling papers would only complicate matters. Okay. Christine is going to launch the quick poll. I believe I set it up so that you can give a single answer or you can give multiple answers.
Yes,
whatever
I will.
You need to do.
I will launch the poll, and then don't leave until I give you some great information, including how to get CEUs for today. So I'm launching the poll now. You should be able to see the first question. All right. Is it just the one question, Marn, or are
No,
there
it's
two?
Two questions, yeah.
Okay. So then,
It's similar to this question, but it's about E-Alphabetics.
I don't know why the second question didn't come up. The other question should have come up. I don't know why it didn't come up.
Okay.
Technology is such a wonderful thing. Yeah, no, if I relaunch, it's going to clear everything out.
Okay, well then let's just close it and I'll take what I can get.
Wait, I figured it out.
Okay. Quick answer this one.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
This reminds me of watching election results.
Except we're going to get an answer in just a minute.
Lots of shifting and yeah.
All right. All right, that's most everybody. I'll end the polling. Somebody asked what I figured out. There's actually a drop-down menu that I didn't pay attention to where you can choose which poll question. Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
We're about a minute after 4.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
We're done.
I
So,
need to.
Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, I welcome your email. I miss you. I miss seeing EBE teachers in person. So let me know, and we will all, I think, stick around if you have questions that weren't answered. So
How about the CEUs, Christine?
Yep, I'm putting right now. The affinity groups are next. So if you, there are 4 affinity groups going on. You definitely want to go to your flyer to check that out. There's also an important survey that we would like you to, I'm going to put the link here. If you could quickly do it, it's a Google Doc form. That would be wonderful. So I just put that in. And then for CEUs, you will go back to your flyer where all the things are, and the flyer will explain, or there's a link for doing an evaluation for today. And once you submit the evaluation, you will receive your CEUs. And just as a reminder, there is a link at the top of the flyer near the top to participant materials, and that will take you to all of the folders from all of the sessions where you can go in and click and get slides, other materials that you want.
Awesome.
Link to the flyer, you got it. All right. Trying to get.
Christine, I have a question.
Yes.
Can I do that CEU thing after I get back tonight, 10 o'clock or whatever, when I'm back from my classes that I teach tonight?
I believe so. I believe that you can go to the link and complete the evaluation whenever you can. And
Okay,
then when
'cause
you
I
submit the evaluation, you'll get instructions about your CEUs.
Okay, because otherwise I gotta fly and I don't want to be late. And I don't want to speed.
No, I don't want you to either. Again, just one more time on the flyer, after all of the sessions, there's a little spot. It says questions and then it says CEUs. And there are 2 links. One is for the evaluation for day 1 today, and one is for the evaluation for day 2 tomorrow. And when you submit each evaluation, you will see the directions for getting your CEUs. And if there are any questions also on the flyer, Gail Rutan, her email is there, and don't hesitate to email her with any questions.
I'm not seeing any questions, Marn, coming in.
yeah, I don't either.
Okay.
So thank you for fielding those as they occurred.
Sure.
Well, I think we're done.
Yeah, nicely done, Marn.
Oh, it's hard to tell, you know. Yeah, it's so hard not seeing people. Yeah, but anyway.
At the end, we could always say, hey, open up your camera if you want and wave and see faces for a minute.
So there's still 29 participants.
Okay.
We're just slow filling out forms, but what are the results of the second survey?
Okay.
I just put in the chat box that the winner was 56%. What you like best is it includes a combination of word meaning and text activities.
Okay.
It was only 9% for it offers a lot of teacher choice and selection. So people really like the combination of
Okay.
activities and the fact that they can use it from a distance.
I couldn't do the poll. Couldn't figure it out.
Maybe because you're, oh,
Oh, okay. I guessed that might have been it.
Okay.
there are always mysteries in Zoom. And just when you think you have it figured out, they change something and there's a new mystery.
People are entering the waiting room.
Maybe she has a question.
Christine, can I just ask what might be a silly question? I had to teach until 1:30, so I wasn't able to attend the whole thing. Should I skip the CEUs or should I just do part of them?
Well, you joined at 1:30.
Yeah,
I mean, we had the welcome, until 12:30, and then we hit a break in there. I would just go ahead. I think at this point we would have just given them
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I
Go
wouldn't
ahead.
get picky about it.
No, it's not a silly question. It is a very honest question. Thank you for your honesty, but I would just go
Yes.
ahead and take the CEUs.
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you and thanks for the session.
Thank you, Jean.
Bye, Jean. Good to hear you.
Ladies, I gotta run.
Okay. Thank you, Terrisa, for being a compatriot here.
Here to support you.
It takes a village for Marn to do Zoom webinars.
You
It
do
takes everyone. I mean, everybody needs support.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
by the way, Dan Brusky, I felt so bad. I accidentally muted you because he came in just above your name to be admitted. And he, of course, being Dan, privately messaged me about how sorry he was. And I said, you are just a troublemaker.
Well, it was odd because normally I would blame myself for something like that. But it was like,
It was
wasn't
not your
even
fault
me.
at all.
It was not
Mm-mm.
here.
And you quickly saw the problem and unmuted yourself. So
Well, it helps to have the toolbar at the top of the screen rather than the bottom of the screen.
mhm.
And how it got to the top, I don't know, but that was good. Because-
Marn, just so you know, because when we first got the questions about where the slides are going to be posted,
Mhm.
I did go to that link where there's a folder for each one. It's different from the folder that we use to prepare.
Mhm.
And I dropped the PDF that you had of the slides and the PDF of those directions in. So that's it. Just both PDFs are there. Everything else is not. So
Okay. Bye, Terrisa.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So, you know what? I think it's not going to happen because it wouldn't be 6 feet distance, but it would be so helpful for me just to sit and watch you or Gail or Marisa or Patsy manage the double screen. It's just,
yeah, it's, and there's been, and I still get twisted up. Where I can't, all of a sudden I've got my 2 screens and then all of a sudden I can't find my, for some reason I can't hover and I can't find my chat box and it's, I don't know what is so complex about it, but I feel like I shouldn't be having so many boo-boos, but I still do.
well, that's why I think it's safe to blame Zoom because I'm sure they're
Or me. You
manipulating
could
a
have blamed me
lot of
today.
things. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
think about the multiple users of Zoom and across the world. I mean, they must be changing and improving things daily.
Every week, I think Zoom comes up with an update.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it was just a couple weeks ago when all of a sudden something changed and everybody at Robbinsdale was like, we all tried to get into our Zoom accounts. Nobody could get in without without verifying our account, and nobody had any idea what that was about. But you had to go back into when you set up your meeting and make sure that the box that requires verification was unchecked. And how would we know that?
So there wasn't any message about major change here. No.
No, it happened to me. And then all of a sudden, Robbinsdale email, everybody started saying, we can't get in. Our students are having trouble. It just all hit at one time. And our IT people finally put something out. But I emailed Marisa right away, and Marisa's like, okay, clearly something else has changed that I don't understand. So we just have to have a sense of humor. I mean,
Yeah.
being able to use the technology well and correctly isn't necessarily a sign of intelligence. You can be a very smart person and have trouble with technology. You had 107 people, so that was awesome, Marn.
Okay, so save chat. I click on save chat.
Yep, if you click on in the chat box, those 3 little dots, and then the top says save chat. Yep,
I'm there.
you'll save your chat.
And where do I save it to? Oh, show in folder. What folder? Oh, okay.
There's a folder automatically on your I think it's documents or something on your drive, but so you got the chat now?
Yep, I got it. Okay.
Awesome. Right. Well, I think we can close.
I think we can. Thanks again, Christine.
It was great.
Are you into an affinity group?
I don't know if I'm going to go to an affinity group right now. I have one more thing I have to do. So I will see if I'm going to be able to jump in. I'm definitely going to take the survey though.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Well,
thanks, Marn.
I will see you tomorrow morning. I've got my note page all ready. So.
All right. Thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Think of all that you do for me. I will reciprocate.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Bye-bye.